wildflowers lighting black holes, letting it fall together. I'm letting go for once forever. Following this map under father sky is open heart. Golden hair is spun into the lightning whisper to the stars. I turn my eyes into windows to wildflowers, light and black holes. The light meeting in my middle, between two worlds, the pattern move. A pattern grows into a map. How many times I take this path, woven with the vine, walking the red road alive. Jackie, I be the Maya. Jackie, I be the Maya. Jackie, I be the Maya. Ash of white and open sky, awareness seeing eye to eye. A quilt holding the silence of 1,000 rays streaming through time. I reach out my hand to feel the four winds that turn the wheel. The light meeting in my middle, between two worlds, the pattern move. A pattern grows into a map. How many times I take this path, how many times I peel it back. Still the story stays intact. Free my heart of hearts. Mystery of love, don't go, she love. Jackie, I be the Maya. Jackie, I be the Maya. Jackie, I be the Maya. Be the Maya, 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 be the Maya.
Okay, okay. Can we get a mic check? Are we good in here? Everybody in the panel?
Microphone check. 1, 2, check.
Yes, sir.
Yep, I hear everybody.
Okay. Oh no. Oh Lord. We having an issue.
Yes, I hear you. I added the file under the V account, so it's you can present the one called it starts with the presentation. So where the Fēng Tū are we first?
Let's see. Are they messing with the microphones again? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes.
Uh-oh, they're doing it again. So I'm just gonna fall back because they're messing up the stream from my side. I know everyone can hear each other, but I can't hear you all. So Mr. Vince, you can go ahead and take over. I'm about to add the screen up for you.
Okay.
Because everyone can hear all of us, but for some reason I can't hear you all.
I can't even put okay in the chat. So, oh yeah, I can in the back on the back end.
There we go. Okay. So thanks again for Laurie and Mark to be here to talk with us about this presentation. And this is a great opportunity to hear about the voyage from 1434 to North America. And we're very, very thankful for Laurie and Mark to be here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Laurie if she can start talking with us about the presentation. We really appreciate it. I think Laurie's on mute. You can't hear Laurie.
Okay.
There you go.
I should be unmuted now. Okay. Okay. So this presentation is about, as it says, the physical evidence that we found about the true final destination of the last voyage of the man behind the legends of Sinbad. Now, if you go to the first slide, we think of Sinbad as this cartoon figure. But it was actually about the exploits of a real man known as the San Bao Taijian, a eunuch, an admiral, an explorer from the Ming Dynasty. As this illustration shows him, Zheng He. And like that figure in the myths, he led a fleet, not just a ship, but a vast fleet, hundreds of ships, all sizes, from small coastal craft to the baochuans, the treasure ships that were 9 masts, twice the length of a soccer field, and unbelievably huge, rivaling things that would not happen in be created in shipyards for hundreds of years into the future from this time. But he did this thing. Let me see. I'm trying to get back to my.
Okay, she's lost her present. Here we go.
Okay. It bounces back and forth on me. We're all having technical issues today. Annoying, but we will survive. Here we go. Okay. Now, the final fate of the treasure fleet was intentionally and unintentionally was that it was destroyed. Some of it was destroyed by an impact of half of a twin comet off the southern tip of the New Zealand island chain that you can see today as the Mahuika impactor crater that destroyed by tsunami and flash burn 80% of all of the Chinese fleet within the Pacific, and caused the Aboriginal peoples of Australia to say, don't build within 20 miles of this particular shore. Because if you look at those 20 miles, you'll find debris from the vast tsunami at that time, that far inland. Destroyed every tree on the islands of New Zealand at that time and just made a mess. But the thing is, next slide, how far did that fleet go other than just there? As it says on this marker stele near the Nanjing boatyards at the Temple of the Heavenly Queen, also known as Kuan Yin, the goddess of mercy and sailors, that they got as far as Fēng Tu. So where is Fēng Tu? What is Fēng Tu? Fēng Tu was a name that they gave to two places, actually, Fēng Du, Fēng Du La. Fēng Du La was a place that on maps that we see now was more in the area of the Yucatan, but Fēng Du was north. And as you go north, you find interesting things. And let's see here. Now, we know that this material from a book called An Account of the Western World Voyages of the San Bao Eunuch, written by Luo Mao Deng in about 1585, which puts it at 150 years, more or less, after the end recorded of the voyages, an end with which they destroyed even every ship that was capable of making such a voyage again, including ships that were not yet launched. And, the question is, not why the account was so bizarre, why the timing was 150 years, but, the fact that at the end of the book, they talk about, that they were going to seal away the records for 150 years. And that timing adds up to when Luo published his series of his serial account of this thing. And he didn't know. What is it? Now, here's one of the names they gave for places. Adan Guo, which means, the red country, the men, the holy men. Now, it also goes with the name Aden, which is a port city in in Yemen, on the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. This is interesting because while some people say, oh, Zheng He died at sea off Calicut, this was also said that he went to Aden on his way to Hajj. And if he went to Hajj, that's after the recorded dates of his alleged death. Oh, my speaker's being weird. Now, as I said, this is a country the southern country of holy men, the men in red robes, the hot Arab country, place that gave birth to faith. These all referred to Islam because this is the path to Mecca and Medina. As I said, he was said to have gone on Hajj. He went here as part of his trip as a faithful and practicing Muslim. So we also know that he went to a place called Po within this. And there was a man described who had bizarre clothing, a hat like a rooster's coxcomb, golden robes, and all this. This fit the descriptions of the robes of a Doge of Venice. Now, the Chinese would have believed that this was the center of European civilization because it was the other end of the Silk Road. It was the place where all their people went to and from. They didn't know the people in this region would have very different opinions on that. Now, as we said, they called it Po. And if you look in this area, this is the Po Valley, the Po River, and all this. This was where they were. And they talk about it was a city that you could walk to the city from much farther out at low tide. You had to walk across salt flats, to get into the city. At high tide, you could have sailed in, but at low tide, you had to walk. I have talked to people who've been to Venice. That's it exactly. And another one. They also talked about the gift of a fabulous book that was, covered with glorious detailing, illuminated pages, and so on. They also quoted a line out of the book that the word of the Lord God does not return to him void, which is kind of a exact quote out of the book of Isaiah. So we know that they were definitely somewhere in the Christian world. And this was given to them by someone who interrupted their meeting with the man in the golden robes and said, "You're in the wrong place. You're not at the center of civilization. You have to come with me." And he confiscated them, the diplomatic party, the gifts, and so forth, and took them to another place where the Chinese sneerily described a local religious patriarch who was carried around in a sedan chair. And it really covers the descriptions of the Pope at the time. Now, I always say that Mark and I are dragon hunters because the Ming Dynasty had the flag, the dragon flag, that was their emblem, the emblem of their emperor, and so on. You can go on. And they talked about going to a place where dragons were also important to them. And this is a picture of Kukulkan, the Mayan god. They, in the next pages of Luo, they would describe a city under a Mayan type governmental and religious framework, a place of dragons, a place where people were gathered and brought to feed the gods. Well, 25% of all bone trash at Cahokia is human, with signs of ritual cannibalism. And I think feeding the gods wasn't serving them. I think it was being served to them. And, you know, they talk about that these were the Yagwari people and all of the ritual and so on. And that when they got to that city, after they had gone into a bay where they saw what it can only be described as narwhals, went up a great river that was bisected by the god of mists and thunders with two wings. Crazy thing is, that's a good description of the Canadian American Falls of Niagara Falls and the St. Lawrence. Later, a stele would be found that matched the description of what they said they left behind. And it would be taken to Paris and eventually be last seen disappearing in the hands of Nazi invaders collecting booty to take home with them. And as it's Al, when the lead scout came in, he found a city of this sort where men in great headdresses, massive belts like wrestlers and so forth, were dealing with prisoners being brought in. A group of prisoners we meet the survivor of, who came in 11 years before from a raid on a camp on the easternmost coast of this continent, brought into, as I said, serve the gods in this place of great headdresses and great ritual. A city of, Fēng Tu means the city of rules and rituals. And every description fits a Mayan daughter culture. Okay, we can go on. And, you really, thinking about this, we really need to look a lot closer at the comparisons, the alignments and so forth of how Cahokia was set up, how the Mayan mother cities were set up. Recent finds on my part show that the Mayans had their cities aligned with the constellation of Orion. Their sacred precincts were shaped like that. And at the winter solstice, that constellation would have been directly overhead. And I said, well, then what does that mean for Cahokia? And recently I found it. Cahokia, what the connection? Cahokia was under a constellation shape not unlike that of Orion, but in the what we now consider the constellations of Ophiuchus and Serpens Cauda and Caput, which makes a shape that the Chinese would call the heavenly market enclosure. And next to it is a circle in the same location as we now find the remains of Woodhenge. We really, really need to look at the oral histories of the people that came out of this area, such as the Osage, the Catawba, and so forth, of those who went east, Osage going west, and look for those connections between America and North America and Mesoamerica, because in the book it refers to that they had come to that area in what, according to modern calculations, would have been the year 865, a year at which we know dozens of Mayan mother cities, strangely emptied and silent, as if people simply dropped what they were doing and walked away, with no matching rise in population elsewhere, but a sudden upswing in mound building and sophistication of the civilizations in Mississippian cities like Cahokia and etc. Now, we'll get back to the Sanbao Taijian as you see those first four characters on the left-hand corner. That would be Zheng He. Zheng He was impressed into royal service at a very young age, was made a court eunuch, and served under multiple emperors. This seventh voyage of a set of voyages that started in 1405 was under a mandate, and the mandate was map the entire world, bringing back tribute and diplomatic connections to lay at the feet of their emperor, who at that time was Zhuangdi. Now, as I said, they described going to the city that had canals and water throughout it. This is a picture of the Kasfakari, the Palace of the Doge. They describe the splendor of this place. And to this day, you can walk into the audience chamber of the Doge and look up and see a map. Big problem. The map predates the Columbian, old Christopher's sets of voyages. This would have been made, at the behest of the Doge from maps his visitors had brought him in the 1430s. They talk about all the people, because they arrived at the time of year that would have been Carnival. The Chinese make the rather amusing comment of, do your people riot all the time? The parties back then apparently were as wild as they are now at Carnival. And the Chinese were fascinated and a bit appalled at the rather freewheeling prostitution and etc. that were going on in the city that they found. So we can go on from here. And as I said, they were meeting with the Doge, and in walked a guy who was built like a barrel and dressed in red, and apparently had been tipped off by a guy that was referred to it, who had stopped and spoken with the Chinese visitors, who was referred to as Jinoa or Genoa. He was referred to by the name of the city that was a massive trading rival with Venice. Their number one rival. They would not have wanted to see Venice get all these maps and therefore have a huge head start on everyone with international trading. And like I said, what was it, Ashkenazi Jew? Columbus was found out to be an Ashkenazi Jew in recent genetic studies. And he bought himself an acceptable pedigree, in a part, as we can see now, is that thanks to the guy from Genoa who tipped off the papal legate and ripped off the Doge and gave Genoa a chance to be tactically and trade and commercially a rival that had a chance against its sometimes warring neighbor, Venice. But this man said, you are not at the center. And like I said, he gave them the fancy book that he quoted from that was definitely and clearly, and I've had this verified, a quote from Isaiah. And he said, you're not at the center of this civilization. You must come with me. And he took them to a city that was full of ruins. The Chinese were a little kind of about that, because the Chinese would have reused that stone a long time ago and let us, instead of letting things like the Colosseum just sit there and molder. So we can move on. Now, generation or so later, I guess the next pass of a comet, Paolo Toscanelli talked about a comet that went through, and there was a sudden upswing in sophistication and astronomical observation at this time as well, as if someone had taught them more. The Chinese have been doing astronomical observation in extreme detail for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and they were following a twin comet. As I said, Paolo Toscanelli tracks that comet, which is no longer twin, a generation later, as it made it swing back by Earth as it went back towards the Oort cloud. But the Chinese, one of the facets of their mandate was to follow these. And as I said, it would be to the destruction of 80% of their fleet in the Pacific. So we can go on. But as I said, before he set out on the final leg of his voyage, Zheng He visited the cities, the holy cities of Mecca, Medina, and did Hajj. And we see beautiful descriptions in Luo of those cities at that time period. They match illustrations and maps and so forth, and diagrams that exist to this day of those cities. And when he was done with Hajj, he would have gone onward. But the thing is, there are many of the maps fall silent. Next. Yeah. This was, when he was in Mecca, it was referred to as the Western Paradise Country, because it was, if you wanted to go to paradise when you died, you went there. So let's move on. That was Mecca and Medina. And it was under, as it said, the Sharia law. And as I said, they were very detailed in that he was doing the proper things, helping to do the cleansing of the Kaab, the great stone that is well known for people doing laps around it as part of their celebration of Hajj. Now, here we're talking about the places now that they visited at that point. Okay, Prince of Po and the country of Aden, the differences between the two. So we know that they did not just stop at that Hajj. All of these are points that they describe. No alcohol, two holy cities close together. As I said, the single holy city that was at the center of the world, he can take you to paradise in 3 days. They were talking about Christ when they were in Po. They were talking about a place of horsemen, Arab horses, the place that Muhammad put together the Muslim faith. And the rivalry between the two is very clear in the descriptions. Okay, and now there was some confusion in Po about the Queen of Heaven, because they were the Chinese had Kuan Yin, Queen of Heaven. The Italians had Mary, Queen of Heaven. And it made it very, very confusing. And there is some real humor in those sections talking about the banquet with the Doge and then the later contacts with what we know as the Pope. They also, when they were in Aden, they described the dimensions of an enshrouded sacred cube. You can see that at the middle of the Kaab. The fact that they washed the inlaid marble with ambergris and rose water, and that anyone who helped in this cleansing would have been given a piece of the old shrouding, because they replaced it every Hajj. Okay. So now we would in 2005, when we were given the great privilege of attending the 500th anniversary of the first sailing of the fleet, we were allowed to visit the Zheng family compound outside in Nanjing. Well, they opened the tomb during the Cultural Revolution. And the craziest is, though he was said to have died, all they found was a pair of his shoes and a lock of his hair. And it was a cenotaph versus a actual tomb. It was still honored, but it was all they had to honor was relics, not the man. The man was not there. Again, there was no sign of what really happened. But we would find that out. As I said, we looked at, give me a second here. I'm going to dig something up. A translation for this phrase, if I can. Okay. But he said, one thing he said was, I can't go back at the end of the voyages. And it goes with this empty tomb. I cannot go back. I have to balance the two burdens of my heart. You see here a big, one of the Bauschmans. He said, and we know from our reading of these last 15 chapters that out of 23 expeditionary units that had been landed on the shores of Fusang, at whose heart was Fēng Tū. Fusang, the country shaped like a mulberry tree, and if you look at a picture of a mulberry tree, it's the shape of North America. But he said, I cannot go back. I must balance the two burdens of my heart. And of those 23 expeditionary units that he had sent out onto the shores of this continent, only 18 had reached the rendezvous. No, only 5 had reached the rendezvous point. 18 were unaccounted for. And then one of these went off after the debrief at the rendezvous point, off up a very muddy river, and apparently left their DNA in my family tree. As Mongols doing exploration, they were warned, don't dawdle, you will be left. Apparently, like Zheng He, who knew that if he went home, his expeditions would be declared completed and a failure because of what they had done at Cahokia. They had violated the mandate of heaven. They had destroyed a civilization that had not first attacked China. But we'll get into that more. And by staying, the expedition never ended. The Sanbao Taijian stayed behind and to wait for his men and to preserve the emperor's mandate of heaven by never ending what otherwise would be declared a failure as a mission. Okay, so we go on. Now, another reason we know where that mission ended is something that's in the hand of Xiao Liang Li. And it's this. This is a medallion that would have been the diplomatic credentials carried by the leader of such an expedition. And people go, oh, well, it's a mess. It's poorly mixed alloy of brass. It's a mess on the back, etc. and so forth. But there's a problem with that. In the book, it describes that there was a problem. The man who made the medallion put the wrong inscription on the back, and they had to grind it off, as you see here, leaving that rough back. He had done a bad job of mixing the brass. He was executed for his flaws, but this medallion would be found near Asheville, North Carolina, right where it should be if the Sanbao Zheng He had completed his task. And you see here the square that is the mention of the emperor, the grinding off of the back where the error in inscription would have been, and it has every flaw it should. If it is the same medallion that they said, oh, we can make another one as we travel, but did not, that Zheng He said he that was given to Carey on his expedition. Okay.
I was going to say this front says what represents the Emperor Zhuan Di is basically what it says.
Yes.
The holder represents the Emperor Zhuan Di. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And the next. Now, you look at that map at the back and you think, well, this is a European map. It's not a European map.
There, let's see what's going on.
Yeah. But you see here North America and South America. This is a map that predates European exploration. But
okay.
I'll let Mark talk about the details.
Map in the background is the 1602 Matteo Ricci map from China, which supposedly has European sources. Ricci was a Jesuit missionary to China. The problem is that much of the map uses are words that were out of date by 1602. Su Youngli, who owns the medallion previously mentioned, did an analysis of the map for the International Cartographers Association. He concluded that the map had pre-1430 sources, the world map, and his findings were accepted by the international map makers. So that's pretty close to official that the 1602 Ricci map is based on Chinese exploration by 1430 or so. Okay.
And you see here, the tides, the currents within the Atlantic Ocean. And you see at the top the currents that would have been ridden across the ocean by Norse explorers, and that would have ended up with them at, in Labrador at Cape Breton Headlands. And then if you look, the currents coming around the bottom end of Africa, these are the same currents and wind patterns that carry hurricanes. So you could have broken off all your masts and simply being driven by currents and wind with no effort at all, and ended up at the same place. The low point between the northern going south and the south going north currents is Cape Breton Headlands. And that's right where Oxa Meadows were. And that's what the Chinese would describe as an island like a glove with fingers, and the bluff faces and so forth. And that you went into that gulf behind it, up a river, past the god of mists and thunders with two wings, and then to, as you see, 5 interconnected freshwater seas, the Great Lakes. This would have taken them to great rivers like the Ohio, which would have taken them south directly to the Mississippi and to Cahokia, the center. Yeah, Mark has corrected me. The Illinois.
The route, and it was used later by the French from Lake Michigan or the Chicago area. That was the Illinois River. You could get places with the Ohio, but in this case, you would have taken the Illinois River and right on down the Illinois River in a couple of days, you would have been to Cahokia at the junction of the Mississippi, the Missouri, and the Illinois rivers.
Barely any effort. This area would be later described as the empty quarter for 200 years, a place where there were areas in which if you touched the ground with a spade or a plow, you could not help but turn up human bone. Signs of what caused the failure of the expeditions, the bad choices. But we'll get to that. So we can go on. Okay, as I said, this is talking about that about getting there. Let's go on. Okay, as I said, they describe the headlands, the yellowish cliffs, the rocky area, that it was extremely cold and snowy when they arrived there, in what would have been June, and that's Canada for you. Let's go on. And there was a strange ghost-like fish with an extremely long knife-like tooth sticking out of the front of its face. And I think you can see exactly what they were describing here. The ghost-like fish was definitely a narwhal. And as we've seen in recent history, and throughout recorded history in this region, a man falls overboard and the narwhal saved him. And narwhals are very friendly cetaceans, and they are well known for rescuing people who are accidentally taking a swim in the waters in which they live, and struggling, and famous for saving them at that time. Now, as I said before, they came up the river and they saw the god of mists and thunders with two wings. Well, if you look at the two sides of the Niagara Falls, you have the American and the Canadian Falls. You have extremely thunderous noise. You have mists. You have that god of mists and thunders. And the island that divides those two falls is the god's body in between the two. So we go on from there. And as we said, they come up the rivers to those interconnected freshwater seas. And then from there, they could come down the river after they reached a place where we would now say is Chicago. And they came to a city with a mountain with only one way up or down. That was man-made. They spoke of the courts. They spoke of everything in that layout as what we know now as the remaining mounds at the heart of Cahokia. We can go on. And they also talked about a very interesting thing that the locals did. They had fat little snakes, that were very chubby and buzzed like bees. We know the snake cult was quite active at Cahokia. And they speak of men in heavy leather protective gear, taking care of the snakes in what we know to this day as remains we have seen of snake pits that were part of that culture. And if you can see what's behind this image, there is a picture of a pair of snakes in local artwork that I copied in an image there, but you can't quite see it. So let's go on. Now, Luo was ridiculously detailed. The Chinese were OCD about taking records down of what they saw. If you read through this list, you'll see all of these things that are described as part of Fēng Tū. I'll let Mark read this.
Okay, she needs a break. She's tired. Okay, social customs and moral codes included. Specific details on how to make pemmican and hominy, which is fascinating in a Chinese book. Okay, the local population played and gambled on a game identical to what is called chunky. Great plazas of Mississippian cities had market stalls with woven reed mats and awnings. Okay, some officials, such as ambassadors, carried a shark-toothed blade as a badge of office.
A makawaddle.
Women and men legal issues were adjudicated by a separate court system. Separate court systems. Details of systems of taxation, matrilineal inheritance, and the distribution of food are mentioned. Men and women referred to as tied together in marriage. Women served as clan chiefs. Public drunkenness was a punishable crime. The consumption of alcoholic beverages was limited to the elderly and those who had done military service. Taking captives in raids to the east for the dual purpose of collecting slaves and human sacrifices. Killing enemies in battle rather than taking them captive was considered highly detestable. Warfare and training for it were highly ritualized. Severed hands and heads on public display matched graves of men buried without them. Okay, the preserved bodies, or sometimes only the heads of dead relatives, are consulted for decisions and brought out for and included in special holiday celebrations. public service as punishment for social crimes like laziness and filial impiety.
If you dissed mom and dad, you got in trouble. Part of the description of the warrior training was that these people had groups of warriors under different warrior cult names. And we see the Yaguari people, they mean the Jaguar warriors. We know that pre-Columbian Jaguars were much more extensive in their territories, moving all the way up into what we call now North America. And if you look at statues of Mayan and Aztecs, you see the very heavy belts, you see the very large and elaborate headdresses, and the fish scale breastplates lasted into Native American times. And they talk about them wearing around in their underwear, meaning loincloths as well. All of this is what we know is Mayan. We know is Aztec later. And we have statuary that tells us we can know this is Cahokia. So let's go to the next. Okay. And they talk about the cow heads. But the thing is, what they were talking about was cow headdresses. You know, there is a very funny illustration where there's a picture of a man with a horse's head and a man with a cow's head. But when you read the word has dual meaning. It's not just head, but headdress. And we know buffalo headdresses would have, to them, looked like a cow. What we call a roach, or some would say a mohawk, looks like a horse's mane. These people had very strong facial features. The hawk noses, the facial tattooing. We see it on effigy jars that would have carried ashes of people. Those are on display at Cahokia. We know that these people did the tattooing, the body painting, and so on, that they removed their eyebrows, that they kept their teeth, wore all of these things. All of these things we know from surviving Mississippian cultures that existed into the time of the arrival of De Soto to the South. And all of this is dead on. Okay, the religious practices, you know, you see here the sun spirit, you know, the great sun. His feet did not touch the ground. He had 13 bearers, heralded by the blowing of trumpets. Astronomy and astrology at the center of all beliefs. They worship multiple Venuses. Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl, I believe, were the morning and evening manifestations of Venus. Everything was planned according to astronomy and astrology. They talk about things in the historical records and the archaeological records, and they talk about them in Luo, about the religious structure. They talk about the water lilies and the sacredness of the flower, the drug use to commune with the gods, the snake cult, the temple prostitution. Some of the women who come to Cahokia on the court day when the Chinese delegation arrived were complaining about mistreatment by Chinese explorers and so on. There were descriptions of the sun dance, very clear, bloodletting as penance, the mummification of the bodies. We know that there's two mounds. One was for the preparation and one was for the burial, that are right at the farthest end of the Cahokian central complex from the Great Mound. They talk about the long tooth caps, the cult to the dead, the cities, the sister city across the Great River that was for the worship of the gods of the dead. St. Louis is over a cave system. The caverns are very extensive. That would have been considered an entrance to the underworld. Cahokia was referred to as the city of the sunrise. It was on the sunrise side of the river. Both cities are matching constellations that would have been overhead. St. Louis at winter solstice, Cahokia at summer solstice. They talk about the day of lifting the banners, a specific holiday when they arrived. And this is still something known in Mexico. As I say there, the day of lifting of banners on feathered poles. It's associated with a birdman god. We know is the birdman on the birdman stone that is displayed prominently at Cahokia. This would have been Huachtopachtli, hummingbird to the left, and they would have they said that they followed him north. As with in winter, the hummingbirds winter in the Yucatan and come to Central North America in the summer, they followed in the same way. And I can't see that bottom item. Yeah. And then, like I said, there's descriptions of these creatures that were at the area. Everything is laid out perfectly. Cahokia, they go, oh, well, we can't find, they must not have hunted buffalo because we can't find bones. As anybody who knows anything about deer hunting, you can't carry, if you have to travel slow, you can't carry a lot of raw meat. And they would not have carried the bones that they did not have a use for. So they prepared it in the field as is described in the book. The large river otters, the various fish, the propagation of fish that they caught and allowed to grow bigger, freshwater pearls, shrimp, bull sharks. There's a man who lost an arm to a shark. We know bull sharks come up the Mississippi, gigantic snapping turtles, dragon turtles. We call them alligator snappers, wild ginger, persimmons, white mulberry, propagation of purple grain that they describe as broomcorn millet, and we know is a description of maize. If I could show you, I could show you the pictures of maize on the corn, on the cob, and corn cobs. The plants look identical. The where and what they are next to in the way of bodies of water, it's all of it just lays out exactly where, when, and what should be where it's found in the book, in reality. Now, I was talking about that one star constellation that is Ophiuchus and Serpens Kata and Kaput. But in Chinese, it is the heavenly market enclosure. And if you see something there that looks familiar, you're looking at the shape of Cahokia. And to the north of it, there is a circle known as the rolled scroll. And this is exactly in the location we know today as Woodhenge. And this is what they refer to as the palisade. There's even the locations of the gates are marked here. It all matches. And the major locations within the area, you see locations of mounds within the enclosure. Everything was astronomy. It's there. You know, if nothing else, how did they know that? Again, here it is. This is where everything is. And they talk about those two mounds at the front gate, at the very front tip. Like I said, the one where the bodies were prepared and those that could not be kept were burned to ash. Zhangjian is the place where the astronomers were. There's one way up north next to the thing. They said that was where the people who served the great sun lived. You look over Dijuo, which is Alpha 1, Alpha 2 Hercules, and then 95 and 102 Hercules. This is the warrior twins. This was always a facet of sacred precinct. There would be a place where the two gods shared one mound. You look up there, Guangzhou, which is the rolled scroll. That's right where right where Woodhenge is supposed to be. And like I said, you had the poles at the center where they did what amounts to the Sundance. You have the ball court to the one side. You see it just past. It looks kind of like a spoon over there by just past the words Tianxi. And it's all where it's supposed to be. They talk about the fixed gates that wrap around each other. Everything is exactly laid out, exactly what they told us. Archaeologists have proved it.
Okay, I'll interject here. There's one chapter where the beginning of the chapter states, and it's like that they're marveling at it. It said that the layout of the city of Fēng Tū is a reflection of the heavenly market enclosure. And that's how the chapter starts out. And they were amazed that the city and the sky reflected each other. Okay.
Okay, well, we can go on to something else here. I think we're about at the end. And as I said, there was a massive failure that caused Zheng He to stay behind so that the expeditions never ended. And that destroyed Cahokia and would cause young men who had not heard from the city who came to visit to leave behind them an account saying the land is covered with the dead and the dying men, women, and children as far as the eye could see. What you're looking at is pictures of people with smallpox. The Chinese had given the gift of heavenly flowers, and like the man in the upper right, many of them showed signs of the appearance of having burned like firewood logs, like burnt firewood logs. The blackening of the skin would have been the 100% fatal form, hemorrhagic smallpox, versus that the little girl has to the left, where she has the other form of smallpox, which can also be fatal, but only 94% of the time if you're a previously untouched population. Get your shots, folks. But they talk about people with running sores on their arms, their faces, and their legs, or looking burnt on their arms, their faces, and their legs. And they knew they had made a mistake. They sought to disrupt a culture where people ate each other in ritual acts of cannibalism to get them to be good Buddhists instead, to discredit their society leadership, their governmental leadership, their religious leadership. They had no idea that 94% of them would die because of their mistake. And as I said, this led to the acknowledgement that they had destroyed a culture that had not attacked them first. And this would remove from the emperor, Xuandi, the mandate of heaven. This is why they burned the ships. They buried the records under imperial seal for 150 years. And why, when they came out garbled through the writings of Luo Mao Deng. So we can go on from here. The descriptions of the men's clothing. We see this in statuary that has been found of men and horses wearing armor and clothing of this sort. That is Native American statuary that's been found, and it is clearly Mongols and the horsemen of the Ming Dynasty. And let's see, again, there was the medallion with its flaws that are described exactly in the book, the mistakes that were made. We can go on.
I'd like to add to that. Now, that medallion has been on television twice. Yeah. It's not like it's unknown. It was on with William Shatner, believe it or not. And then the other one was America Unearthed, where Su Lee brought it out and from his safe in Columbus, Ohio, and showed it off. So it's not an unknown thing. It has been on television twice. It is very well documented. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It is the real thing.
Yeah, it's been discounted because of its flaws, but its flaws
Prove it's real.
are what mark it as exactly what is described by Luo.
Okay.
There was no other one like it with those mistakes. Said, did they do everything they said they would? Let's flip on.
How far did they go?
How far did they go? What was, and they said, Cahokia. Cahokia answers all those questions. And you see those two long mounds. That's not a mound up there in the middle. That is a rack where the first in scout Wang Ming found the rack of head and hands. But everything is exactly where he said it was. You can go to Cahokia today and see these things, though they will tell you they have no idea what they mean. But this is what Luo describes to the foot, to the inch. So that's it. Well, anybody wants to hear anything?
Thank you. That was amazing.
Yeah, that's great production today. I learned a lot today.
Yes, thank you. That was amazing and astounding. And learning about the Ashland, North Carolina medallion was really interesting. How it matched, and just hearing about how they were heralded by the blowing of trumpets. They had the Mongol horseman figurines. The comets led them and eventually destroyed their ship. The pearls that they found, all these things that describe the village of Cahokia are amazing to learn about. And thank you for your translation and your for sharing this with us. And that was really interesting. And I know Mark's done a lot on the Piasaw glyph near Alton, Illinois. And I wondered if Mark could share a little bit about that and how it relates to this.
Okay, I'm having trouble here.
The Piasaw.
Okay, we're talking about the Piasaw monument. It was two dragons within an arch up on a bluff near Cahokia. There was two dragons in the center. There was what they call the precious pearl surrounded by fire, by flames. It was discovered by Marquette in, 1673.
If you go back to the picture of the stele early in the presentation, you'll see what it looked like pretty much. You go way back to kind of the beginning.
That could be an entire and it could be an entire event. Anyway, the art with the dragons in it was discovered supposedly by
there it is.
Okay, go back one.
Back again.
We have it. No.
Okay, forward. Sorry. There it is.
Okay. The top of it. There's a dragon. There's two dragons.
And they would have been slightly changed so that they would face forward because this is it was flat versus this three-dimensional representation.
Anyway, there was this big mystery where it came from. Marquette said it was so well done and painted so well. Said even the artists in Europe would have trouble doing this. And the locals said, we don't know who. We didn't do it. It had something to do with these small people that came down the river.
That we associate with the arrival of terrible disease.
Yes. And that's where it stood for the next, until the early 1800s.
And it wasn't at Alton.
No, okay. It was damaged by the time we got to the 1800s because the Indians had guns, and every time they went by it, they took a shot at it. So they damaged it quite a bit. Okay, now there is an Alton Piasaw, which is a bad bird. It's a ridiculous thing. It was written about to sell books in the early 1800s by a so-called Professor Russell. They placed it in Alton. The older maps show that the Piasaw was in Elza, Illinois, about 6 miles north of there, which, by the way, the maps indicate that it's called Piasol Bluff. There's a painting by an American artist from the 1830s that show the bluffs and mountains and hills in the background. If you were to drive up the highway along the Mississippi River and go until everything lines up, just like in the painting, you will be in Elza, where the Piasol Bluff was. It was there until the 1803. Lewis and Clark went by there and didn't see it somehow. They wrote down everything they saw in their journals, but this gigantic monument on a bluff they failed to see, though they were there for an entire winter in the general area. Oddly, Jefferson told them one of your goals of your expedition up the Missouri River is to get the route to China. So for some reason, they believed that you could get to China from there. And probably it was because this Piasol was there. In the and that's where it stood. It was damaged, and there was these crazy stories about it up into the 1850s. And in the 1850s, there was a U.S. senator named James Semple, and he purchased the land around the Piasol, and he started building a village, a subdivision, basically. And the deal was, I will give you a free building lot if you knock down the bluff where this monument is, and you can build your house with the limestone that you removed from there. All you got to do is just knock it down. I give you free land. After a while, the Piasol was gone, and then he started selling land. You couldn't get it free anymore, but you had to buy it. But the Piasol was gone by then. Now, it turns out that James Semple was a strong proponent of manifest destiny, that the U.S. had the right to take everything all the way to the coast up into Canada. He was willing to go to war with the British to take Canada even before they worked that out. But a very strong proponent of manifest destiny. So it's almost certain that he's the one who destroyed the Piasol, turned it into building stone, and erased somebody else's claim to the western part of the United States. So it was very convenient. And after that, it seemed like people just forgot where it was. Of course, there was a propaganda campaign to make sure that everybody knew the Piasol was actually a bird that ate people, and it lived in Alton, not Elza to the north. That's the way it stood until there was two men who researched it, one in the 1880s, one I believe in the 1920s or 30s. They were both local bankers that had some time on their hand. They both concluded that the original Piasol was Chinese. So they were at odds with what the popular story was.
The sun.
Okay. Now, another thing that's odd, we did some research. Piasol supposedly meant bird that devours people or some ridiculous thing in the story that sold magazines. Our research, we discovered there was one man who still spoke an Indian language from that area, an old man, and he said, Piasol, you're saying it wrong, and he gave a different pronunciation, which is like Piasol or something like that. It was kind of unclear because it was just written out and you couldn't really hear what he said. However, when we did some digging, we found that Piasol in Chinese is a reference to a place of unburied dead from disease. And massive. So that they said they built the Piasol dragon. It is in the book, and it describes it as marking the farthest extent of Chinese exploration, as well as being a memorial to the dead. So Piasol wasn't a bird that devoured people. Piasol was a memorial to the unburied dead from a great disaster. So today we know what Piasol actually means, in spite of what the city of Alton, Illinois will tell you. Okay?
Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting.
Oh, can you all hear me? I know we were having issues last time.
We can hear you, but it's dim. It's weak.
Perfect. So I can turn my camera back on also. So I personally want to thank you both, Miss Laurie and Mr. Mark, for your presentation today. My question about the voyage, what time period are we dealing with again? So I can make sure we have it on record.
Okay. Matching up with the Chinese records, it would have started in 1405 and ended about 1435 or so, 34, 35, when the last of the ships that were capable of returning did return to Nanjing and through via the port city of.
Okay. Now, what you have to remember is it was a series of voyages several years apart. So
yes,
they launched the fleet. Yeah, 7 sets, 7 voyages of Sinbad. The first set, well, they launched their fleet in 1405. We know there was a 1408 map of the world, or 1418 map of the world, rather. So we know there was a 1418 voyage. There was a 1421 voyage, like Gavin Menzies wrote about, and then there was a gap, and then there was the 1433, 34, 35 voyages.
Yonghua, who had instituted the first launching of the voyages, had died. His son said they're too expensive. I want to focus on, rebuilding a lot of the temples and so forth that were damaged or destroyed during the Mongol takeover, during the Yuan. And then when he died, his son Zhuangdi said, I want to be bigger than both dad and granddad, and I want to go and spread Buddhism and so forth through this final set of voyages, which he did not at the time realize would be the final set until he accepted the advice of some religious leaders that they should use heavenly flowers, which is the word for smallpox, as a gift that would disrupt and cause them to want to be Sinified, become a Chinese vassal state.
Okay.
And it worked too well, and too well was bad.
Okay, I'll add to that the purpose, like I said, like Laurie said, was to subjugate them, to make them subject to the emperor. But the goal was iron. Iron, we take it for granted today, but back then it could take several man years of labor to produce 1 ton of iron, which is incredible when you think about it. They came to Fēng Tu. They had done some exploring before. They knew there were mountains to the south of Fēng Tu full of iron. They called them the magnetite or iron mountains. Mountains of iron.
Magnetite. And to the south of us is what's called Iron Mountain, one of the the largest freestanding bodies of almost laboratory pure iron in the world. An extrusion from the Earth's core, our iron-cored planet. And the Chinese spoke of why there was no sign of them doing mining, because it is so prevalent that you go through the rivers and streams, and all you had to do at that time, and even now, was just pick up chunks that had washed out. You didn't even have to bother to dig.
Any of the small streams in that area, we've done that. Just walk up a creek and just pick up chunks of iron, put them in a bag. It reduced the amount of labor to produce a ton of iron astronomically. The Iron Mountains, and there's several of them that there's Iron Mountain, then there's the P Ridge mine. There's several sources of iron in the area that were far beyond anything else in the world. There's no other place on Earth that has a mountain made out of iron like you would find in Ironton, Missouri. There was a mountain there, and they mined it. They fought over it in the Civil War. They shot about 1,000 Confederates in 15 minutes who were trying to capture the Union fort there. It was 1863 to 64. It's got a long history of interesting things, including the Civil War. Interestingly, we have a friend who has an iron mine in that area, and he's got like 500 million tons of iron available if he can ever get anybody to refine it. It's got rare earth elements in it, and thorium you can use in atomic reactors. So it's very complicated because of politics and regulations, but there are vast resources down there that are available even today. As far as the Chinese were concerned, iron was more valuable than gold or silver. They had that, but if they could come up with iron by the hundreds of tons and load it up in their ships, they could have advanced their technology, up to the next level. They were beginning to industrialize, and they would have been hundreds of years ahead of everybody else in the world with fast sources firing like that, and their ability,
their
and
guns,
their
guns, crossbows, they had gunpowder and all of these things when everybody else was swinging swords and arrows.
And their ship technology, those giant Baochuans, they were bolted together. They had bulkheads that were waterproof. They were 300 and 400 years ahead of the Europeans in construction, but they needed iron. And so it was very important to get iron, which is why they came to America.
It was a controlled substance. It was so precious. You had to get permits and licenses to have it. And then you were controlled in how much you had. You had to spend exorbitant fees and so forth. And the idea of this, there was no price too expensive to pay to get access to something that would launch a budding military industrial complex into complete and total world domination.
Okay.
And
I have
turned
a
out
question.
the price was too much because Cahokia fell.
And they killed their labor.
Yeah.
So I just looked up the Pasa bird that y'all were talking about just a while ago. That has a reference to the smallpox that came into Cahokia. Now, after looking up that bird and seeing a painted relic of the bird, I just went on ahead, and this may be far-fetched, but the bird looks like the great horned owl.
Well, we see pictures of this same mess on patent medicine bottles. The man who wrote the story for a magazine to make it as an allegory for Christ laying down his life, Ottawaga, who did not exist, his son said Dad made it all up. And if you look at Henry Lewis's lithograph of the Piasa, you look at the details in the background, you look at Caspar Wilde's sketch of the Piasa, and if you simply trace around the edges, you start finding it fits with the Chinese monument to the last set of voyages. That capstone, it matches it. I mean, I went through bit by bit, taking Lewis's, taking Wilde, and putting them in there, and taking the elements that remained, the human face down to one side in the Henry Lewis lithograph, the visual twisting, coiling around each other that you can barely see at the top. The fact that the horns of this alleged creature in the Lewis lithograph wrap around just the same as the precious pearl in the Chinese emblem. And if you look very, very, very close at the front 2 feet in the Lewis lithograph, you see that they are not feet. But if you look in the photograph I have here and the Lewis lithograph, you'll see that the upper 2 left-hand characters, well, actually the 2 middle characters, match the shape of the feet of the Piasa bird in the Lewis lithograph. They aren't feet, they're Chinese characters. And that somebody had just kind of put together the pieces and tried to make something that they could be comfortable with. There was a red circle down to one side that's referred to in the book as a symbol of sincerity and the man and the burial place of the man who designed this monument. stonemason by the name of Luke. All those details are there. If you ignore the easy and look and see the difficult. If you look closer, look past what people said and see more. This is my original notes. I kept trying to pull them up and I wasn't having much luck with that this morning. But yeah, if you want to post these alongside the pictures as available for people to look at later, that's perfectly fine. It explains all the things that I said and didn't explain of Chinese text that I had there. And it covers it. It covers it up very, very simply and clearly. Again, like I said, this is my initial speech that I gave. And like I said, this gives the descriptions and so forth that I was showing. My people, they refer to them as the dangerous my people. And yes, okay, the pranks and debauchery of the carnival pre-Lent, and the people of China going, what? Okay, and here again is this the doubled comet Toscanelli's in the 1430s, the first pass. Is this the great nation, which also known as heaven? Speaking of Mecca and Medina. The differences between Aden and Po, which are both referred to. The cenotaph, where he was said to have died of sickness. I have found the explanation for that just recently. What really happened? There was a bit of a messing with people going on. He did not die. He was misdirecting people so that he could stage a raid and capture a enemy ruler. I hear stuff about that. Day after day, that everything was just miserable. The current pushing their ships along as if the gods themselves were pushing them. It's far too late to turn back. Another 2 months onward under extreme conditions. Okay, so they went one more month and there they were. There was, the Canadian marker that was there. It's described, the marker stele, a very special place, the two-winged god of thunder, an unorthodox lofty mountain that is described in Luo. Okay, again, here's the details of the social customs. And the practices. Animals, plants, land itself. Smallpox victims. The misery people were put through. Yes, where did they go? I said, not quite done. It said, there's more to be read. There's more to be seen. And today, Mark and I are working on a new section of the book that describes a place with what has to be the city that is now Mexico City, a city in the middle of a lake next to a volcano, surrounded by water. We know this is how the Aztecs and all built that city. We know that they had descriptions of the flayed gods in there as worshippers as well. It's going to be interesting when I get that out because they had quite a time in Mexico, and we believe that there's also descriptions of visits to the Inca in the south. It will be interesting to see what a non Jesuit dealing with those hideous heathens perspective gives on those two cultures. But we'll see. We're still working on that, and we're getting close to at least getting one of the central chapters done. And we'll let you know. So, anything else?
Okay, so I was referring back to the question that I previously asked about the Pasa bird. So I was just looking at a few things and making a quick reference. The reason why I have referenced the great horned owl is because and across American Indian cultures or traditions, oral traditions, we stay away from owls because they symbolize death.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, that would be a very good reason for somebody putting that kind of head on the Payasa in their reconstruction of it and their restyling of it. I not saying that the guy that redesigned it didn't know a little bit about native cultures, but I know that it's not what it originally looked like.
Okay.
And making it an emblem of death is definitely right.
Also, I'd like to interject. Actually, Mexico, the city that you're speaking about, it was actually already up and running before the Aztecs went down there before
Yes.
dealing with the invasion. And
Yeah.
also, I
Well,
like to interject. I also like to interject as well. Christopher Columbus was not an Ashkenazi. He was actually a Moorish Sephardic Jew. That's what he was. Thank you.
That's okay. It's always good to get it right. Have somebody help us get it more correct.
And I really appreciate you.
Thank you. We just, anytime we can get someone who helps us make it better, we thank them because we know we don't know everything. It makes us, I guess, in some ways that makes us unique, that we know we don't know. And it gives us more room in our heads to learn.
Yes, ma'am. It goes both ways.
Exactly. And share.
Yeah.
Can y'all hear me? I'm still trying to make sure that I'm clear.
We
Yeah,
hear
we hear
you.
you. We hear you.
Perfect. Miss Laurie, I was reading through your works, you and Mr. Mark. So I was reading through your works. And as stated last week or about last week, I think it was last week. But there's much that I've come across in them that actually confirms some things I have in my own book. And I wanted to ask the Yama, are these the same Yamasi that we know of historically that were in Cahokia?
Yamas, the Yamasi who ran Cahokia.
I'd say probably the problem is so many of these names of tribes and groups sounds the same, but they get garbled over time, and it's really hard to tell who's what. But there's a lot so it sounds the same. You really need a linguist who can tell you how languages change and migrate. But there's a lot of similarities in names. And that's basically all I know to tell you. I'm not an expert in that area, but there are some similarities.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like kids' game. You know the old kids' game where a telephone where one kid whispers something into someone else's ear and it goes around the circle. Things mangle as they get repeated by people who don't quite understand it the first time. And
so
it does.
So I want what I would like not ask, but what we do know is the priesthood in Cahokia were run by a group called the Yama, or what we know as the Yamasi. However, I do believe at that time, that 1400 time period, that original group of Yamasee or Yama were no longer there. That it could have been a new group of settlers who could have taken on that name and parts of that culture that countered.
Breathing up, cuz.
Well, we do know that fecal stanal studies have shown there that right in this time period there was a sudden and precipitous drop in population. Because just to put it bluntly, the runoff wasn't as poopy. And there are people who bounce it all over the place and they want to round it off to some specific number. But we can say, because of Luo, almost exactly when that extreme population drop was because of the outbreak that was inflicted upon them.
Okay, and Vince, Vince, are you there?
Yes.
So I know you've been reading the Walla have you got to the part where the Lenape began to invade the East?
Yes, and they had written that in very good detail about the point where the sharpened leg went and split and went east, and then the other portion went south to the Gulf Coast. And I specifically wanted to ask about that, if Laurie had discovered that, or also the connection to Ashland with the medallion. Was this the Fēng Tu that they went to after Cahokia? Did they go from to Ashland or the other way?
Well, we don't have records in Luo of that, but Mark has some information.
Okay, yeah. What is it? Richard Thornton, who's a researcher, several years ago wrote something where he thought that the survivors of the upper class of Cahokia moved east to Jairwa, that's a close pronunciation, and became the Catawbas. Basically, that I'm not losing my train of thought here, but he thinks that the upper class.
Oh no, that's
the survivors moved.
Yep.
And, became the Catawbas, founded a city. We just hold on.
There's a deer in our yard.
Where?
It's moving down.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. We had a deer just show up outside our window.
That's good medicine.
That's good medicine. Yeah.
We
That's good
out in
medicine.
the boonies.
That's good medicine.
I lost my thoughts went fleeting with the deer. The Catawba were known for their pottery. Now, S.L. Lee did some research on that. That's the owner of the medallion. He thinks that the Catawba pottery has Chinese influences. He says even some of the words that are related to making a pottery are Chinese.
Yes.
So, and that would have been the general area where the Zheng He medallion was found.
Also, the words about the inscription that there was an inscription included in the initial construction of the Payasa, it would have given directions for where by celestial navigation of, looking at the stars, where they would have to go to meet up with those of the left behinds. And they would have gone along with the Catawba and what would be the Cherokee to the area around Asheville, North Carolina.
Yep. After the destruction, they came back east.
Yes.
What many are learning today about Cahokia is that, and I have to be careful when I say this about the people who play Indian. The panel knows what I mean.
Yes, sir.
Cahokia at that time was similar to a Memphis, right? Egypt as a big city. You had multiple
and
yes,
Oxford,
right, or Los Angeles or Miami or New York, because you have different groups of people coming from their homelands in order to this city to do business. So pottery that's been made 5,000 years, like you say, begins to show Mayan influence, right? Or Yama influence, because they made the mounds much greater in the east. Um, you
Yes.
will see, like you say, the Chinese influence and sometimes Scandinavian influences on these different artifacts. So Cahokia was a great melting pot. And Vince, the story that you're reading was the first fall of the city. And the story that they actually translated and brought back to the world is showing how the people that settled there or later came in contact with the Chinese.
Yes.
When we look at language, right, and when we look at language and we speak on Yama, Yama also was the name for the Mobilian trade language. This is an actual fact. And Yama in the Mobilian trade language means to oblige. Some would means it says like yes, right, or to agree, but it's to oblige. If you study the Muskogean language, Yama or Yamasi means civil, someone that's liberal, timid, someone that's neighborly, right? Someone that's accommodating, someone that's gentle. So that system that you showed, Miss Laurie, of the Yama people, um, that spirit still existed at that time, and that's a major find, especially for you to put their autonym. That's their name. They called themselves that. It's not like someone came in and said these are the Yama. Nah. So they had to have some form of relationship for the Chinese to record that and keep that. Same, Mr. Mark, with Shuara, how you may find it in China or Chinese languages or in their script. And that too shows the depth of the trade and how far to the interior, or
Well,
towards the coast, excuse me, they came in. So that's amazing.
we know that artifacts with a carefully documented chain of provenance from dig to laboratory have been found as far north as the Great Lakes with chocolate residue. So we know that the great river, like unto the Yangtze, we now refer to as the Mississippi, would have been a conduit. And they didn't need roads. They didn't have roads because they didn't need them.
Right,
They had so many bodies of
right.
water which they could use for easy, low effort transit. And they would go from Yama to what the Chinese translate in the chapters I'm working on, from the land between, which is what the Mexican people referred to Mesoamerica as the land between Guozhong versus Zhongguo, which was the Middle Kingdom of China. But we know that there was from DNA in the dead and so forth that has been found in Cahokia and accurately examined and defined, that so many of the people there were not local. And it, like I said, it was that hub. It was that New York City, that Los Angeles, that Miami of its time, at Oxford, where people went to learn and to study and so on. And when it was knocked out, the day after was a very pale shadow of what had
Oh,
been before.
definitely. Uh, I was it about 2 years ago? Um, I shocked someone with the story because there are still stories that families that carry that story, or those that deal in that realm. So again, knowing that the waterways or the connected waterways were like the roads today or the highways, and knowing the history of it, there's nothing that you have to guess about. You're completely on point. When those people, or those the so-called Maya, when they did leave or take what they called the white path, the first thing they did when coming over the Gulf, across the Gulf, and they were walking, we're talking about the original, they took the Mississippi on up, right? But then you also have another group that left the Yucatan in ships, and those became known as the Mikasuki today. Um, so at that time period, them bringing more maids is what began to create that Mississippian era. So I definitely
We just lost our sound.
another conversation about that one day when I'm actually free. Yes.
Yeah, we lost the sound for a minute there.
We're still losing it. That's where these things usually go.
Okay. Is my mic back right? Am I good? Am I okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We're good. Okay. Oh, as I was saying, so as far as your research, what you're speaking on is 100% on point, especially as the different groups of what we call Maya, right, or Ishati speakers. One thing you will notice during the Creek Nation, right, or the true formation of the Creek Nation, De Soto came across a town called Latama. Being that he spoke Spanish, he didn't translate it properly, but it would have been Yama. This was a group of Cahokia priests. But then he went across another town that he called Ichisi. Had he truly known the language of the people, he would have said Ichidi. But people like this is a similar thing. Hichiri and Ishati are the same language. The Chichen Itza. All of these are the same people. The thing is, there was still a slight separation in language. So this is why you start to see Chela or Chelakwi everywhere, because the Hichiti speakers or the Mayans were considering people who didn't speak their language as those who speak something different, because those people didn't have the priestly language. So this is why Mr. Mark, the people or Jarara of Shurara, this is why they were able to communicate with the people of Kofa Techekwi, but the Shirara weren't able to communicate with the so-called Hichiti because they spoke a different language. The original language of the people of Kofa Techekwi was the same home language as the Shirara. However, the people of Kofa Techekwi, when their women got back east, they instilled the Mississippian order era. So I remember telling you all that all women, all chiefs were women at one point. However, during the priesthood, it was only select women, the daughters of the sun, similar to the Eastern stars. These women came back east and had control over the coast, and it was three sisters. One of the sisters' daughter was taken, and they called her the Lady of Kofa Techekwi, but it was a daughter of the big one. When you all study that, when you all get that, when you all master that, you'll have an exact trade route and an exact migration route for these Maya that people are looking. They were the people that people were calling Yamasi. They were the people that people were calling Ichidi. However, when the Aztec kingdom or chiefdom fell in, what is it, 1521, you'll notice they started to migrate to the east themselves. De Soto got to the land in 1540. This is why he was able to recognize the items that the people had because Cortez had fought them 2 decades prior to his own settlement. So
Migration
that's
under
another
societal pressure.
tie-in. Yes, ma'am. Exactly. Definitely.
And also, I like to interject something as well. By Cahokia being the largest trading hub, you actually had two other trading hubs that actually connect everything going to Cahokia. Um, the Serpent Mound that was in Ohio was a trading point, as well as the Owl Mound that's in Poverty Point was also a trading spot. So you had both of those trading spots, one from the north and one from the south. They would actually meet in the middle where Cahokia is, and that's where you had the largest trading spot at.
Cross, cross, crossroads. Um, there is a description of what I believe is Poverty Point in the Luo record, but it is referred to in reference to a monkey wind god. And if you look at aerial photography of Poverty Point, you see that it is not just an arc, but it is a full circle of a set of mounds that were at one point washed away during seismic activity. This area has earthquakes, and the course of the rivers do change under that kind of environmental pressure, and it cut that complex in half. But they talk about that was a place of a woman chief. That was a place of the monkey wind god, which would have had the Ekatl, which would have had the round temple complex, which you can see, like I said, if you look at black and white aerial photography of the area. And it's more, everything is more interesting than people want to make it. And it's always fun to dig a little deeper and find a little more.
Yes, it was circular. The whole township was circular. But the mound that people call a bird mound was actually an owl mound. So in the occultic world, you can see where the serpent actually circled a mound, biting
Oh,
his
that
tail.
in Ohio, yes. I was talking
Yes.
south, but yeah.
Yeah, but the bird mound is right there, which is actually an owl mound in Poverty Point. That's an owl mound. Most people thought that it was a hawk, but it's not. It's an owl. It's a bubble.
Interesting. I thought it was a crane.
It's an owl.
All I know is that it's a bird that I don't want to mess with.
And a matter of fact,
Hmm.
when I went there in 2010, I actually activated the mound, and that's how I found out that it was an owl mound. And so, because we had Juneteenth out there, and that was also a part of the land dealing with the Washita. So that's how I also know. And dealing with that, as I did the ceremony on the mound, that's when it came to me. And actually, when the mound was actually being done, mounds. I was supposed to come out at night, but actually, this mound came out. I mean, this owl came out in the daytime, and I was like, "Wow, an owl in the daytime. That's very unique."
When when the when the ancestors send us, bird visitations is freaky. It's reassuring many times. For me, it's eagles. But if it was the scary critters, it would be intimidating in a whole different fashion.
Oh, and also at that same time, I was telling my cousins and them when we was actually riding on the train and we was going around the complex, and I told my cousins and them, I say in 2011 they're gonna do an excavation, and they go find out that one of the mounds is actually a crematorium mounds. And sure enough, when I said that, they came back the following year. We went, and it was like, oh yes, we did an excavation on Mound B, and we come to find out that Mound B is a crematorium mound, and everybody looked at me and said, "Pop, you knew that shit." I was like, you just gotta be in tune.
Like I said, it's not just more interesting than you imagine, it's more interesting than you can imagine. It's it is glorious, terrifying, and indescribable.
And then another thing was so funny is that with Cahokia being the center trademark and the bird mound and the serpent mound being hubs, you actually get to see um when they had the archaeologists that came from St. Paul, Minnesota, Morehouse, Morehead actually. It was Morehead University from out of Minnesota, and it was doing the excavation, it was digging, and they actually found things relics that actually came from up north that actually came down south when they went through Cahokia. And everybody was like, man, that was a central trade. I'm like, yeah.
Pilgrimages, trade and pilgrimages.
Yes. This what I want to ask you, Miss Laurie. Um, did you ever come across a mention that one of the emperor fighters actually fought one of our warriors? Have you ever came across that to see what kind of martial arts skills that they had?
There was a battle on a river with fire arrows and masked canoes that is mentioned in the book. That they completely blocked the river with canoes full of men with fire arrows. Both banks were covered with men and just warriors, period, with fire arrows. And they said, "This far, no farther. You do not release these creatures that spread disease. Your pigs, no more." And past that point in the river, Mississippians lasted till DeSoto.
That's what I feel because that's the information that I heard that was passed down orally. Thank you. I just wanted to know if anybody wrote it down. That's it.
Mark, look at the painting.
What? The wall.
The river painting.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. I did a painting that you see in the initial Luo publication. There was a painting, there was an illustration that a man is talking to a fish, and the man is holding the flowers. And I went through with the description from the book. Is it right there, Mark?
It's on the wall.
Okay. I went through with the description in the book, and I recreated not was there, but what was said to be there.
I gotta get it down.
And Mark's getting the painting I did of this.
I had to knock it down with a stick.
It'll take a little effort.
I'll get you on the way down.
Yeah.
Okay, place on the back side of it.
But I'll see if we can show you this. This is what was actually described. They showed the man with the fish, but what Luo describes is this. And I put in Chief White Eel facing down the men. The Shark Tooth Club, the facing down the Chinese explorers, their men on the banks. And in Mayan at the bottom I wrote, here, Great Chief White Eel, snakefish, prosecuted war and then was decapitated because he was taken captive by the Chinese, who executed him for getting in their way. And this is the painting that I did of that event. In the book, you'll see it as a picture of this man talking to a fish looking up out of the water. But this is what is described in the book.
Also, I like to interject while you showing the picture as well. Um, when they actually bought in the smallpox, what most people don't know is that the bark of the mulberry tree was actually the remedy to actually cure the smallpox.
Interesting. Um, I don't know how effective it would have been, but they did everything they could. And you see the later Aztec god of the flowers, and we think it's probably a reference back to this. And he has healing plants all over him as blossoms in the places where a person would have smallpox sores erupt. And it's interesting that turns up after a gift of heavenly flowers destroyed Cahokia.
That
This is why.
picture. Sorry if I could comment on that picture. It's really interesting about the fish person. And do you think that may have been their clan or their?
It's entirely possible, but he was referred to as Chief White Eel, and that's what the description was of a very strong, aggressive man, tall, and very, very adamant about no more of this. And one of the leaders one of the religious leaders was very upset that he exposed what they were doing on the sly, grabbed a sword and chopped his head off. It's a horrible moment. But Zheng He came into knowledge of what was being done behind his back and stopped it at that point. He was not happy. Yeah, you can talk about that.
Okay. This may have something to do with the battle, but the last chapter of the book, chapter 100, is a treasure list, and they're reporting in to the emperor all the various treasures they got in various countries. And then they come to this one country, and they say, no, we didn't get any treasure from them because they beat us. Basically what it was, they defeated us and we didn't get anything from them. And that was a very interesting admission, that we got all these treasures from all these places around the world, but these one people defeated us and we didn't get anything from them. And since the Chinese tried to go down the Mississippi River and they were stopped, it's likely they were referring to the people to the south who just said, no mas, you can't come here. Okay.
Where do you think that was?
Well, the lower Mississippians, like Laurie said, survived up until the time of DeSoto into the 16th century. There's this mystery, which we think we have solved. Okay, they call it the vacant or empty quarter. That's the Mississippi and Ohio valleys, where everybody mysteriously disappeared. The population crashed sometime in the mid-15th century. They'd be 1430s, 40s, which is what we have said. So there's this archaeological mystery. The people in this area seem to have vanished and had went somewhere else or died or something, but they were just gone. But there would have been the central Mississippi Valley and up into the Ohio River Valley. But south of there, the Mississippians survived up until, like I said, the time of DeSoto. So something that happened to the north did not happen to the south, and so they survived. And that's just what the book said.
Did the book refer to?
Oh, pardon me.
Pardon me. So, did the book refer to ancestor shrine or sculptural figurines of their totem or clan symbols?
That's your question. I don't think so.
No, they did not seem to be there that terribly long before things started to just shred. The impact of the infliction of the heavenly flowers had taken place with other advanced scouts, other than Wang Ming, who is referred to as the first man from the 1430s expedition to enter Cahokia. But we see more of that on maps, Yaguari people and so on and so forth. We see more of that in statuary from these areas, the copper plates and so on. But it's not in the book. They're busy focusing on just very specific events. The first contact, the impact of the arrival of the main body of the group, the priesthood saying, basically, you're ugly and your mother dresses you funny. And just the response of the people to the infliction of the illness. The man who comes to the great sun and says, I can no longer serve you. I must go home and die with my family. The people who said, we went up and down the river and the canoe, the people had been dead so long that the canoes were beginning to fill with rainwater and sink along the shorelines. We go into villages and everybody is dead, and so on and so on. They were so busy cataloging the destruction that they did not catalog a lot of the cultural specifics, other than those that I do list there in that cultural list. Those are very much surface descriptions. They did not do the very heavy duty stuff. I may see more of the specific clans as I get into the Mexico section. I am seeing a lot of mention of serpent and these things, but I will look closer. I will let you know as I find those in the Mexico portions of the manuscript.
Thank you. And do you have any plans to publish this research coming up in the upcoming?
Yeah. Well, like I said, one thing that I am very eager to publish is a confirmation of Gavin and my findings that Zheng He lived beyond Calicut, that it was a misreading. He was in the middle of a banquet where they were getting a lot of important military people drunk so that they were, and keeping them busy for the course of the night. And Zheng He said, oh, I have a bellyache. I've eaten something that's disagreed with me. I've got to go. And he was complaining of symptoms like unto cholera. They didn't say cholera, but like unto. And the next morning, the guys look around and say, well, where is he? And, we got to go back home. We want to say goodbye to the leader of your expedition. Oh, he's gone ahead of you. He's already in the city. He had kept the military, the bulk of the military forces and leadership busy at a hot party full of girls and alcohol, and then had gone into the city with his forces. Zheng had the lead and taken over. And he had not died, but he had started a rumor of illness so that he could undertake a raid. And he captured the king of the city so that the king of the city, who had been attacking ships of the fleet, could be convinced to don't do any more of that. I think that'll be among the first things that I publish. Some of the more initial material of the arrival into Venice. That'll come out probably on Beyond Calicut. That's my projected title so far. Calicut and Beyond, where it's that bridging part in there between the descriptions of Mexico and that the time after the fleet divides after Calicut and goes in all directions, which is to the Americas and to the west coast of the Americas, as well as the east coast, the land in between those two coasts. We'll see. There's a lot in there that I can't give you specifics because I don't have them yet, but it's good. I can give you that much, that there is rich material that will be coming out as I get that done.
Thank you.
Amazing.
That was definitely appreciated. And I really like your publication, To the Gates of Fengtu. The book is available online, and it's highly recommended. If everyone could check it out, it's a great book.
Thank you. Every point that there was a possible point of controversy or a point of historical oral tradition or archaeological record to back up, I put a footnote. So that section with footnotes is pretty huge.
It's 1,600 footnotes in 15 chapters.
Yeah. But I wanted to make sure that if there was any question, that I explained where I came from to make the conclusions I did. But this is my way of honoring my Osage ancestors who have lost so much. They lost their city, they lost their role in the world, and they became the buffalo hunters. And it's an opportunity to go and give back voices. And I'm going to keep doing that until I run out of voices that need to be heard. Or time, depending on how long I live.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, guys. We enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Much appreciation.
And in return.
Thank you so much for spending these hours with us. Again, our condolences to your family, and all of the work that you have done. It is amazing. This stream could not have provided any less evidence that we needed, or research that we needed to hear going forward, and to the Osage, like you said, that have lost so much. So to be able to give back to them and be heard, that's great for us to help you be a voice to your people.
Well, one thing that I'm also able to give back, and I cried when I found out about our genetics, that there was a group of men who went up a very muddy river, didn't get home again. That I finally had a chance to go home on the behalf of them as a daughter of the fleet, the Chinese fleet, and be the first family member to get home in, nearly 500 years. And then to know it after the fact, I wept. And it just really, really just struck me in the heart. And they too deserve to have their voices given back, and I've had a chance to give that back and to speak in China on that, and it is great. We actually have 3 books on Amazon: To the Gates of Fengtu, Chasing Dragons: The True History of the Payasa, and my book of restorations, which is also a coloring book, Horsemen of the Ming Dynasty. And if you look in there, you'll see that the horses are very much like the Appaloosas of the Northwestern Plains. And when the expedition went up there, they took mares, stallions, and geldings. They had horses to breed more horses. And the people of the plains rode for centuries afterwards.
Miss Laurie, did I hear you say Appaloosas?
They're in the coloring book.
They're from the original book.
Yes.
Chinese.
And those are restorations of the pictures in each of the chapters. And I have translated the titles, giving them specifics on showing the original that I restored and the restored version of the original. So it's all
Because
there.
there's a Opelousas, Louisiana, where you had the Opelousas Indians at, also down here in Louisiana.
Yeah. Those as I said, 18 plus 1 out of 23 expeditionary units did not make it back to the rendezvous point at what is now Elsa, Illinois. Those horses went somewhere, and they disseminated through native populations that contacted and intermarried with the lost units that never got home.
Well,
So
I'll tell you this.
They're more Mongol pony genetically than they were ever Spanish horses.
Well, I'll tell you this, Miss Laurie, and Mr. Mark, the Opelousas actually came and married amongst the Bagula Indians that's down there, in the lower part of Louisiana.
Cool. Like I said, enjoy the book. I have even more pictures. One of these days I'll get around, put out a couple more of those books of restorations, and it'll be fun. I found in the trash and garbage in one spot a picture that I played dot to dot with, and I realized I had found a depiction of the two comets that were being followed. And as well as horses, as well as pictures of native peoples that were shown one way in the Luo book because they had no idea how to interpret it, and they thought it was a fairy tale, so they went crazy with it. And pictures of people that made sense and not fake.
Well, I guess the saying is true. Another one's trash is another one's treasure.
It's all in how you look at what you see. And this guy has a lot to do with it. He does all my supporting research so that and reads other people's books so that I don't accidentally quote somebody else instead of looking at what the original material said. And so it's fun.
Supporting research.
He undervalues himself.
I think we're about talked out here. Are we about ready to sum up or end? Did we lose sound again? Have we lost sound again?
I hear you, and
No, you haven't lost sound. I'm just driving.
But yeah, thanks again, everybody, for joining. This has been really interesting, and really appreciate everybody's time and hearing about this. It's amazing.
Well, our pleasure. Our pleasure to speak for those who've been silenced. To those who are ready to hear.
And once again, thank you, and you have our condolences.
Thank you. You know, it happens to all of us. We just have to do the best that we can as we go along. So I do.
Okay, is Wale still on the panel with us, or did he drop?
Oh yeah, you did lose connection on the other devices. They can't hear it all.
Okay, well, if that's the end of the presentation and no one don't have any more questions, we're gonna open the floor one more time for questions, and then after that we can close up the show. Anybody have any questions in the panel?
Voice
or
good.
in the chat.
Hello, hello. Mic check, mic check.
All right, he's back. He's
Man,
back. All right. Go
I
ahead,
don't
Wale.
know what's going on. I was trying to pull something up for Mr. Mark, because I have a migration legend from the Muskogee Creek that speak on them migrating. But what I'll do, Mr. Mark, is I'll share that with you personally off of this screen. That way it doesn't glitch out. And we can build on it. Um, I do have to get going because my wife and I are going wine testing. For both of you, I appreciate your work and spending these 2 hours with us. My mom and my auntie are in the comments. They stated that they appreciate you all's work. And we can't see where this goes further, right? My aunt also gave you her love, the blue hearts, for the blue fire is a unity fire. So she sent you some love from our family to yours. With that being said, we had a wonderful show. I would love to have you on again, but she just there go the door opening again. So let me get out of here, you all. I love y'all. Thank y'all very much. Peace, peace. Mr. Mark, you know how it go. When the wife says it's time to go, hey,
It's
we
time to
Time to
go.
go.
time to go. All right, y'all.
You're under orders
All right,
to
have a good
enjoy
one.
yourself.
I will, most definitely.
Okay, thank you, Jeff Wilson.